Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at Ezekiel chapters 40 through 43. And we're going to be trying to pull some things out of there and see some things from these four chapters that are going to help us maybe understand a little bit more of what their purpose is and why God goes through such detail in them. Over the last few days, we've been reading through these chapters, and as you've seen, it is a highly detailed, highly intricate vision of a temple and of the Lord's temple as it's described here. But as you get into these chapters, you also find that it is something that is very distinctive in the way that it's being described. And so let's go through and look at a couple of things in regards to these chapters and see some of the message that's behind it. First of all, in order to go through and truly be able to understand what's being discussed, we also have to understand the time frame in which it's being given. So going back to chapter 40, and in the first verse, Ezekiel says this took place in the 25th year of our captivity. And so Ezekiel has been in captivity now for 25 years. It has been a long time since he has been home. But not only has it been 25 years since he's been in captivity, he also goes on to say that it was the 14th year after the city was captured. Now, the city being discussed here is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is going to fall. The walls are going to be destroyed. The city itself is going to be razed to the ground. And the temple is going to be completely destroyed. So it has been 14 years since the temple was completely decimated by Nebuchadnezzar. And it's going to be 25 years since Ezekiel has seen that temple, and since those who are around him have seen that temple. This is now a distant memory for all of them. Anything that has happened a decade and a half ago is going to now fall into the categories of a distant memory. It's not something that you think about with great clarity in many ways, but it might be something you dream about. It might be something you think back on with nostalgia and with various other feelings and emotions involved with it. And so as God here is talking about the temple, he's not here giving a vision of something that is still standing. He's also not giving a vision of something that they have seen recently. And so this is all a part of the message that God is giving. As a matter of fact, he says in verse 4 of chapter 40, he says, "Son of man, look with your eyes and hear with your ears and fix your mind on everything I show you, for you were brought here so that I might show them to you. Declare to the house of Israel everything you see." So Ezekiel is going to be commanded to take the things that God is going to show him. And this is actually going to stretch into chapter 48 because God's not done with this particular vision. We've just hit a pause point in it. And so he's going to pick right back up again with things pertaining to this vision in Ezekiel chapter 44. But God is going to tell Ezekiel to give to Israel all of this vision, everything that he sees, everything that he hears and is told, is he needs to pass on. That brings us into chapter 43. I'm not necessarily going to spend a lot of time in the contents of 40, 41, and 42, not because they're not important or don't have value, but because they're very tedious in these descriptions and in all the lists of the cubits of all of the different rooms and all of the different sizes and all of the different stretchings out in all of these different areas. And so those are things that are very important in the context of all of this. But in just trying to quickly go through and summarize what's being done and why, we're going to jump straight back to chapter 43. And as you come into chapter 43, he is going to again see a vision of the glory of the Lord. And it's described in verse 3 as being the same vision or the same likeness of the vision that he saw when he was by the river Kibar, which takes us all the way back to chapter 1. And so this has now been the same illustration, the same vision that God has utilized to present himself to Ezekiel for a long time now. And it's exactly like the one he saw at the very beginning. If you want to know what that is, go back to our discussion of Ezekiel chapter 1, and you'll see what it is that he is illustrating there. And when he sees the glory of the Lord, he falls on his face. Now, he has just been taken on a tour, as it were, of a non-existent temple, of a picture of a temple, and all of its dimensions and all of its measurings. So what's the point? What's the purpose? God tells Ezekiel in verse 7 of chapter 43, Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. No more shall the house of Israel defile my holy name, they nor their kings by their harlotry, nor with the carcasses of their kings on their high places. When they set the threshold by my threshold, and their doorpost by my doorpost, with a wall between them and me, they defiled my holy name by the abominations which they have committed. Therefore I have consumed them in my anger. Now let them put their harlotry and the carcasses of their kings far away from me, and I will dwell in their midst forever. Son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. In other words, this is supposed to be a dual-fold message to the people of Israel. Number one, it is to be a reminder of what the temple was supposed to be and how they scorned it and disdained it with their abominations. How they went through and they abused what had been given to them. But also how there's going to be a temple rebuilt. And there is going to be a place to worship God that is going to be reset. Now, are all of these dimensions and are all of these pictures literal in what the temple is going to be like? There's a lot of question about that. There doesn't seem to be a message that this is literally what it's going to be. But he does say in verse 10, let them measure the pattern. And there are going to be similarities in the size and the scope of the temple as you move forward, especially into the days of the time of Jesus. However, the initial rebuilding of the temple is going to be one that is going to cause those who saw the original temple to weep, because it is not going to have the same glory as Solomon's temple is. The picture here seems to not so much be about the size of the temple or the dimensions of the temple, but rather the fact that God has plans in place. That God has plans in place for them to be able to return to Jerusalem, for them to be able to rebuild the temple, for them to be able to restart their lives and to reset their worship to Him, but only if they are willing to be ashamed of what they have done and to turn away from the abominations that led them to this point to begin with. So when you come into chapters 40 through 43, he's reminding them of the temple. He is reminding them of the place where he was supposed to be worshipped in the past, that they turned into an abomination. And he's going to tell them that that place is going to be available for them again. That place is going to be used by them again, but only for the service of God. Next time we're going to come back and we'll continue this vision and the messages that God is going to deliver to Ezekiel in regards to all of these things in chapter 44. But until then, I hope you have a great day.